It's been 4 months since Ben Sasse announced, the day before Christmas Eve, that he was dying, but he's not dead yet. Ben Sasse will not be remembered as a statesman, a scholar, or a man of faith. He will be remembered as a careerist operator whose every rung on the ladder, from Ivy League classrooms to university presidencies to the United States Senate, was greased by self-promotion, lowered standards, wasteful spending, and moral hypocrisy. As he sits before cameras with his face raw and bleeding from the experimental drug he takes for the stage for pancreatic cancer, he announced on December 23, 2025, the record demands a clear-eyed evaluation of the man Nebraska once sent to Washington. This is not eulogy, it is accounting. Before Sasse dies, his full catalog of failures must stand exposed. Sasse's education followed the predictable path of establishment grooming. He passed through Harvard, Oxford, and Yale, institutions long accused of instilling globalist priorities over local values or traditional American principles. Critics have repeatedly pointed out that these environments do not merely educate, they network and indoctrinate. Sasse emerged fluent in the language of elite consensus, bureaucratic management, polished rhetoric, and a disdain for populism, skills he would deploy throughout his career. His early professional stops in the Bush-era Department of Health and Human Services and as a management consultant further embedded him in the revolving door between government consulting and academia. Detractors saw these roles as the foundation of the corruption networks that defined him, alliances with powerful financial and political entities that rewarded loyalty to the system rather than to constituents. At Midland University in Fremont, Nebraska, Sasse became one of the youngest college presidents in the country at age 37. The official story praised enrollment growth and a name change, but the reality was far uglier. Critics documented how Sasse engineered a marketing-driven expansion by flooding the school with scholarships. Standards were deliberately lowered. Aid was handed out so broadly that enrollment numbers swelled, but academic rigor collapsed. The strategy opened the doors wider to non-traditional students, immigrants, and minorities, shifting the demographic and cultural makeup of the small Lutheran campus in ways that prioritized optics and revenue over the institution's original mission. It was not educational leadership. It was a numbers game dressed up as reform. Sasse took credit for saving the school, while critics charged he simply diluted it, turning a serious academic enterprise into an enrollment factory that traded excellence for accessibility. His Senate tenure from 2015 to 2023 cemented the pattern. Sasse positioned himself as a moral voice, but the votes and public statements told a different story. He routinely backed the bloated omnibus spending bills that drained taxpayer dollars into endless waste. He stood by while massive COVID relief packages funneled billions into programs later exposed as inefficient or fraudulent. On the 2020 election, Sasse dismissed widespread fraud concerns as baseless and publicly attacked colleagues who sought to challenge the results, calling such efforts dangerous. During the BLM unrest and riots of 2020, he offered tepid responses that critics labeled insufficient against what they described as domestic terrorism and cultural upheaval. On COVID mandates, masks, and vaccines, Sasse aligned with the establishment narrative even as later scientific reviews, government studies, and whistleblowers dismantled the justifications. He helped normalize policies that locked down businesses, closed schools, and pressured families, measures that devastated children's education and mental health while enriching connected interests. His record on trans issues and cultural indoctrination showed the same calculated restraint. Enough conservative language to placate the base, but never enough fire to disrupt the broader progressive momentum in federal policy. Sasse was present for every major moral Republican failure of that era, deficit exploding budgets, foreign entanglements, and the steady erosion of traditional values. He grandstood on faith and principle while enabling the very system he claimed to critique. Nebraska voters who expected a fighter got a polished insider who treated the Senate as another stop on his resume. The transition out of the Senate revealed the backroom mechanics. Sasse resigned midterm in 2022 to become president of the University of Florida, clearing the path for Pete Ricketts to claim the seat via appointment by Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen. Critics described a cozy network linking Sasse, Pillen, and the powerful Ricketts family, an arrangement that allowed Sasse a lucrative landing while entrenching establishment control in Nebraska politics. At Florida, the mask slipped entirely. In just 17 months, Sasse tripled presidential office spending to $17.3 million from the previous $5.6 million. He hired former Senate staffers at inflated salaries, many working remotely from Washington rather than Gainesville. Millions flowed into secretive consulting contracts with firms like McKinsey. Lavish parties and perks for allies became routine. State officials, including Governor Ron DeSantis' administration and the chief financial officer, publicly called for investigations into waste, fraud, and abuse. Public records showed no completed audit cleared him. Sasse's own claim of a clean review was later exposed as false. He resigned citing his wife's health, an excuse widely viewed as cover for being forced out amid the scandals. The man who once preached fiscal responsibility had plundered a public university for cronies and comfort. Then came the cancer announcement. On December 23rd, 2025, the day before Christmas Eve, Sasse took to social media to declare his terminal diagnosis. The timing was grotesque. Families prepared for holiday gatherings. Churches focused on celebration and reflection. Sasse ensured the spotlight would swing to him. Critics across Nebraska and beyond called it textbook narcissism, a calculated bid for sympathy, prayers, and attention at the precise moment when the season belonged to others. He could have waited until after the holidays. Instead, he chose the platform that guaranteed maximum emotional leverage. The move encapsulated a lifetime of self-centered performance. In April 2026 interviews, Sasse appeared with his face covered in bleeding scars and marks from the experimental drug daraxonrasib. He spoke of resurrection, faith, morality, and his certainty of heaven. The visual was jarring. A once polished politician, now physically disintegrating while sermonizing. Detractors saw divine irony, not redemption. The same man who helped push COVID policies and vaccines, measures later tied by many to excess deaths and turbocancers, now fights a disease some link directly to those very interventions. Children suffered adverse effects, and worse because politicians like Sasse lent institutional credibility to mandates and fear campaigns. He urged compliance while insulating himself in elite circles. Now, the scars bleed publicly. If there is a God, as Sasse claims to believe, the suffering stands as earthly accounting, not protection for the righteous, but visible consequence for a career built on deception and damage. The bleeding face becomes the final image, shriveled, scarred, in constant pain, a poster of what remains when arrogance meets reality. Ben Sasse's life was a masterclass in elite capture. He lowered university standards for enrollment optics. He enabled wasteful Washington spending and pandemic overreach. He traded Senate influence for a cushy Florida gig amid allegations of cronyism and excess. He announced terminal illness for holiday sympathy. And through it all, he wrapped himself in Christian rhetoric while the record showed self-service. The world is not better for his presence. Nebraska deserved better. The Senate deserved better. Higher education deserved better. As he faces the end he himself calls a death sentence, the evaluation is complete. Ben Sasse leaves behind a trail of diluted institutions, drained resources, compromised principles, and broken trust. He will be remembered not as a leader of faith, but as a cautionary figure, the politician who moralized while he maneuvered, who preached resurrection while he helped manufacture emergencies that harmed the vulnerable. The scars on his face tell the story more honestly than any podcast ever could. When Sasse is gone, the accounting will stand unchallenged, a career of corruption that made the world worse, and a final chapter that exposed the man behind the mask.